All right. Excellent. So first of all, thank you for inviting me along, Claire. I think we have a mutual lady who likes putting people in touch. So that'll be Debbie. So thank you very much for inviting me along. So this evening, I just want to have a chat with you about title split and what's it all about, really. I'll go in and tell you more about myself as we go through the slides. But very often when people hear about freehold, leasehold, or subdividing land to add value, or title splitting, they always assume that it's very much a pure legal process, and they often think it's something that you do at the end, but it isn't. And it's something that I'm going to talk to you about tonight, just about how it's a very holistic thing and how it actually brings together everything that you're doing now, and actually brings together all your panel members and everything that they're doing. I hope this flashing screen's not too distracting. All right, so here's just a little bit about myself. I won't go on as too much, but I think we all get into property and doing these things, and most of us have a reason that makes us want to not have the day job anymore. So just a little introduction to myself really here. So this is on the left-hand side here. So I should say my name's Harriet Dunn. So my why, the reason I get up most mornings anyway, this is my family here on the left-hand side. I will say that I did have my daughter very young. So I have a grown-up daughter, grown-up son, both in their 30s, but my daughter's 36. And I have 6 grandchildren, a 7th one on the way. Our eldest granddaughter is 14. The youngest is 1. As I say, we've got another one on the way. And that's my why, if you like. That's what keeps me going every day. From a property perspective, myself and my husband, we actually bought our first property in 1985, which is a bit terrifying. There's a picture there of us just outside it, little tiny terraced house, which we actually bought, I think today we call it a lease option or a gifted deposit from the seller, because we had absolutely no money. We were very young there in 1985, you can see the old cars. So that was my first sort of introduction to property, really. And I'll say the reason we had to buy a house very quickly was because our daughter was on the way. Anyway, I will jump forward many, many years for you. So as we bought our first property in 1985, which we agreed the purchase with the seller. We completed immediately. It was practically unlivable. And we actually paid for it monthly after completion, and it took us 18 months to pay for it. Those of you that's similar age to me from that time, the 80s, you'll know it was a very hard time with the recession. And we actually at the time sort of were paying literally out of our benefits every month, but we paid £5,000 for it. Seemed like an awful lot of money at the time. We renovated it up on a Wickes store card and sold it 2 or 3 years later for £11,500. And we thought we had won the lottery. Because we had bought it cash, or paid for it monthly as we went along. It's a bit like a rent to rent really, or an option these days. It meant we could then get on at the same time and buy a second one, remembering that in those days there was no such thing as buy-to-let mortgages. So they've definitely got the property bug. Now, from the property bug in those days, sort of like the 1980s, it wasn't you didn't really appreciate that you were allowed to live off property. It sounds a bit silly, but you had to go and get a proper job. I don't know if other people probably the same age of me, you sort of thought, no, I have to go get a proper job. So although we were still doing property, here's a picture of me on the right-hand side of my lovely children. So when they, although I still had the children, I went to university and did a law degree. I don't know why. I think I thought it would lead me to earning lots of money, and that was quite not right, shall we say. I'm a great believer in education. I'm a great believer in training. I think we learn a lot from others. Even during lockdown, I went and did a couple of courses myself, a lot of them on social media and marketing, but I am a great believer in education, but I did a law degree anyway. And because I love property, having owned properties, I qualified as a commercial property solicitor in 1995. And in the early 2000s, that's a terrible picture of me, but I thought I'll put it on as an excerpt from the local paper. I set up my own legal practice, and it was a niche practice of specialising in property, because I am definitely a bit of a property nerd, but I love it. So I was a commercial property solicitor all the way up to 2014. I own and ran my own niche property law firm. Now, by the time we got to 2014, our children, Samantha and Sam, had grown up and left home. And it was always been our goal. So I'm going to assume a lot of people, by the fact you're here tonight on a Friday night and you're doing what you're doing, you probably also set your goals. And one of our goals was that when our son left home and got married, that we were going to go traveling. But the sort of nature that I am, going traveling often sort of wasn't enough for me, really. I needed something to engage the old grey cells. So I also worked as a property and business consultant during that time. And since 2004, really, I've been working with property investors all across the world. And I have to say, I absolutely love it. And I think, it was managed by landlords. I think that's just absolutely amazing, because everything that you're offering, because I work with so many international clients that absolutely need that support. So I'd definitely like to connect with you on that one. So we came back from traveling. I've got some pictures for you in a minute. When I sold my business in 2014, we went traveling, rented out our house, we had our properties, and we went traveling. And I've just got some sort of pictures for you here, because I think this is why you're here on a Friday night and why you Zoom and why we're talking about property. And it isn't really about what strategy we do, and it isn't about where our properties are. It's literally to enable us to live the lives that we want. And you don't have to have a massive portfolio. You don't have to own a lot of properties to have the life that you want. As long as you're sensible in life and you focus on what you want. So we were very fortunate. Freddie wasn't fortunate, we planned it from 2014 to 2016. We literally went traveling. We lived in Bangkok, we lived in San Diego, we traveled around Australia, we went to China. There's some pictures of there in Kuala Lumpur. We even took all the children, which was nuts, all the children, including the dog, on a fly drive around America, and took them around Las Vegas. And I think it was just so that it's just to realise that there are times in property where, oh my goodness, you just wonder why you're doing it. You really do sometimes. But I think we just focus on what it is that we want to achieve and just set those little goals. And so that we get there, and that's why we're doing it. So I wanted to share that with you, because if we hadn't ever done property, we would have never had that regular income coming in every month that allowed us just to sell the legal practice, walk away from everything, and go traveling, really, which is rather cool. So we came back from traveling. I do work with some of the trainers, and I run several commercial property courses because I love commercial property. But one thing I was aware of dealing with a lot of the training companies that are out there, they tend to sort of do trainings. Actually, it was something that Jane, you just mentioned. They tend to teach you individual subjects. So they'll teach you about lease options, or they'll talk to you about HMOs, or they'll talk to you about this, that, and the other. And what I often find is that actually those are not standalone strategies. They're really not. They are just different routes that you can take down a road to end up with a particular income. And a lot of whether you're looking at HMOs or buy-to-lets or serviced accommodation or social housing, actually depends on the area and the demand. And I felt that one thing that was not covered very well by a lot of the trainers out there is actually something that is, like I describe it, as an umbrella, something that brings all of those strategies that you can use, all those strategies to add value to property. And about a year and a half ago, one of my students of one of the courses, it was actually in Vegas at the time, a lady called Rachel Knight, was working on some property developments that she was doing. And she was talking about doing title split, which people think is a legal process. And it isn't just a legal process. And we got talking and looked at developments together. And from that has come a training company that we run. But tonight, I just want to talk to you about the opportunities and something that I'm hoping you'll get some light bulb moments. So what is title splitting? When people talk about title splitting, it could be land, or if it's a property, talk about England and Wales here, not really Scotland, it's freehold, leasehold. What do we mean? So this is a definition that is from myself and Rachel, okay? So title splitting is a process in which a property developer acquires a single unit of property and physically separates it into multiple units of property. Okay, so I'll say that again for you. The title splitting is a process in which a property developer acquires a single unit of property and physically separates it into multiple units of property. In all instances, the intention is to split the property using the legal process in the geographical location at a time most profitable to the developer. So that's your magic words, most profitable to the developer. Okay, so what you're doing when you're looking to create or subdivide the land into individual units, or subdivide one property into individual units, I want you to think of it that you're actually squeezing your asset. You're taking your asset, which is the physical property, and you are squeezing it to add the maximum value to get the most money out of it. Okay, so that's how I like you to picture what title split is. The other thing that you're doing while you are looking at creating title splitting your property in the correct way, you're actually going to future-proof your portfolio. Okay, and I'm going to explain that much more as we go through. I've got some little cards here because I don't want to miss anything, because it is a really it's a big topic, so I don't want to miss anything, so forgive me if I'm going through this. So when I talk about you're going to future-proof your portfolio, as you can see, my husband, we bought our first property in 1985, and we've been through 3 recessions. We've been through various different governments. I remember interest rates at 18%. And what you need to make sure, those of us that are a bit older and looking back on the mistakes we made very often, you must make sure that when you create your portfolio, it's a balanced portfolio. And you need to make sure in particular that you're aware of mistakes that people made in the past. And one of the big mistakes that people have made in the past is over leveraging. And I'm sure that you may even know people have done that. And people suffer greatly, particularly in times of recession when they've over leveraged. Other things coming forward for us, going forward, we have to think about common hold that's coming in. One of the good things is there's a great relaxation now for committed development and the planning. But very much when myself and Rachel, ever look at a portfolio property, or every time we look at anything, we always like to work backwards. It sounds a bit sad and depressing to say work from death backwards. So a nicer way of saying it, whenever you're planning a project, is to think, when you drive into a car park in your car, you always reverse backwards into the car parking space if you can. Because you know when you come back with your bags of shopping, some other car could park awkwardly. So we always reverse into our car parking spaces so we know we can drive out. And that's a little bit of analogy in property, really. Whenever you're going in to buy a property, you're working out what company to buy in, what company structure it's going to be in, looking at all the tax implications, stamp duty implications, exit strategies. You should always be going in, working how you're going to get out. So it's very definitely something that we use to future-proof our portfolios. So the way I'd like to explain title split to you is it's a very complementary strategy, if I want to call it a strategy. It's almost not a strategy, it's almost like the backbone of everything that you're doing already. So title split in particular is like that umbrella. It's complementary to everything that you're doing. So let me give you some examples of that. If you're buying a piece of land, maybe on that land was a particular house at the moment, and maybe that house is going to be a great HMO, or it's going to be a flip, it could even be a commercial property. But if you can add value by maybe getting planning permission and getting a planning gain on part of that land, you can title split off that land, keep the property that maybe you're going to run as the HMO, and just sell the adjacent land to get a planning gain. Okay. You can use title split is absolutely brilliant for anything to do with pensions, SIPs or SASs. It ties in beautifully with commercial and mixed use properties. It allows you to have completely different legal ownership on a long leasehold, maybe of the ground floor, which is commercial, allowing you to rent that property out and for the income to go into your SIP or your SAS, which then obviously we've got Bryn, is it? This is your area, but allows it to go in tax-free. Why wouldn't you? But you can then have a long lease of the residential element to your buy-to-let company that gives you cash flow for today. So that's actually the stable buy-to-let down the bottom, because you've got cash flow coming in probably from some shop or a commercial or an office or a hairdresser's, it doesn't matter what it is, which is on a long leasehold, maybe of 150 years, that's giving that rental income into your pension. Thank you very much. You've then maybe got 1 or 2 apartments above, could be 1, it could even be 4. Those are all again on individual leaseholds, okay? and that's giving you cash flow for today into your buy-to-let company. So it mirrors and marries beautifully. You can buy them on lease options. So let's say, for example, you've seen a property many, many years ago, it was subdivided physically, but not legally, into separate apartments. It's in okay condition, but it could do with a little bit of tidying up. That is a fantastic property to look at buying. It's great and goes really well with a lease option, because if you take the lease option on it and you renovate the property during the time of the lease option, you can actually do the legal title split of the creation of the leasehold on purchase. But what's really, really cool about that is if you get to the right mortgage brokers, the right mortgage companies, you can get the lending on the market value of the renovated individual units, not the purchase price you paid. There is no other strategy you can do where you can actually get the lending based on the value, not the purchase price. So it works beautiful with lease options. It's great for sourcing, because if you can find a property that can be split into 3, 4, or just 2 units. And remember, we're talking about this could be commercial, it could be residential, it could be mixed use. You might find one property, but as long as you're helping your buyers, you could actually possibly source on 2, okay? It also actually, if you think about it, what you're looking for is a building that you can subdivide. And let's just say for residential tonight, you can find a property to subdivide. As long as those properties are big enough, okay, as long as those units are big enough, you're then going to use the strategy that's appropriate for the area. That could be social housing. It could be serviced accommodation. It could be could it be a HMO? Could it be Minimo? Could it be, I've got an amazing a friend of mine, he bought an old Methodist church. He converted that into four apartments, but each apartment had 2 bedrooms. So he's actually running it as 4 individual HMOs. Obviously, I'm not the HMO expert, but it all aligns, all marries together, it complements. The other beauty you can do, especially, which is great for flips, is if you're ever looking at doing this like a small development or something off plan, doesn't have to be fancy, could be the renovation of an existing property and the creation of some apartments. You can sell them off plan if you're doing title split. So imagine you're one of those sort of big developers out there and you're selling off all the fancy flats. This is just us, downsized in a smaller version. The beauty of selling off plan is you can exchange contracts before you've finished all the works. You can exchange contracts for the sale as long as you're the legal owner before you've done anything. The beauty, you can take that deposit from your buyer, you can take stage payments from your buyer, and you can use it to fund your development. Okay, so tonight I can only give you an overview, but the point I suppose of this slide is that title split is not a standalone strategy, okay? It's the umbrella that goes across everything that you are doing today. But what I'm going to show you now is by doing it, how you're going to add the value to give you not only cash flow for today, but also to get your capital growth, which is the magic that we want. So why are we title splitting? Why are we marrying that with all those strategies that you're all doing now, okay? Because it can give you absolutely brilliant cash flow. You have less or no risk of being of the market being saturated. So that great talk that we just had from Jane is that and one of the things that you said was you have to be in the right area. And one of the mistakes that untrained investors or somebody who's investing in the wrong area, an area they don't know, they buy in the wrong area and it becomes saturated. If we're going to do title splits, especially if they're going to end up being buy-to-lets, we have less risk of saturation, okay? But we can get the cash flow like a HMO, but the management, the amazing management that you've just been talking about, is actually of buy-to-lets, okay? So you can feel yourself relaxing a little bit. The other key thing about why we match the physical split, so walking, putting up the plasterboards, putting the fire protection, putting in the smoke alarms. The other reason why we do the legal title split as soon as possible is we want to benefit from a commercial valuation today, okay, to get as much money out as possible, but we want the security of a long-term comparable valuation. So that's a bricks and mortar. And that's something that I'm going to go into more with you. Okay, So most of the time when you're looking to invest in property, you have to decide really, am I going to go to an area where I get cash flow, or am I going to go to an area where I can get capital growth? It's unusual to get capital growth and cash flow in the same area, or using just buying a traditional house on a buy-to-let, etc. But if you're buying in the right area and you are looking at title splitting in the right way, you actually get access to the capital growth to match the cash flow. And I've got some very recent graphs here to show you, and I've got a real live deal to show you as well. So these are just straight from Zoopla, okay? So if you look at this one, it's on my left. I don't know if it's going to be on your left or not. This is the price growth, and we're ahead at the moment of a 5-year average, except for London. Now, I know it's unusual at the moment, but if we look at year-on-year growth at the moment, okay, we're looking at 6.6% as average. And then you can see the pink dot there is showing that we're getting good capital growth really across the country. And you only have to look on the graph there. I mean, that one goes back to 1998. I actually tried to find one from 1985 because that's when we birthed our first property. But apart from the small bumps that we know about, particularly 2008, we're getting good capital growth. You don't, so I'm from Hull. We have had capital growth this year, but I would say the capital growth that we've had in Hull from sort of November 20 to November 21 have only just taken us back to 2008 prices. It has taken us that long to catch up. So you don't always get that capital growth in all areas. Okay. However, if we go to title split, I'm going to show you how you're going to benefit from both. So this is my business partner, Rachel Knight, and I'm going to show you one of, as you see, she gets around as our Rachel. She does indeed, amazing lady. But I want to show you one of her deals. So she's got many deals, but I wanted to show you this one because I think it's just the sort of thing that you see all the time. It's not big, it's not fancy, it's something that everyone can do. And it's a really nice comparison as to why you would actually title split as opposed to just leaving it as houses. So I'm going to talk you through this one. So she bought here, so she bought 3 houses. They're all next to each other. 2017 she bought them. It was herself actually and her partner Andy. £273,000. Okay, 3 properties, £273,000. Okay, what they did, they turned them into 4 flats. Okay, so you can see now, nicely done, 49A, 49B, 50A and 50B. So the first thing you're probably thinking, well, why flats? Why not just maybe, I don't think they're actually probably big enough for HMO, but what not just flips or straight buy-to-let? So let's have a look at some of the numbers. One of the things that is very important, and one thing that Rachel talks a lot about, is you must finish all of your properties to a very high standard. We're not going to the bottom of the market. We're not going to the middle of the market. We're going to the top of the market because it is all about adding the maximum valuation. It's about getting the maximum valuation to get off your refinance, a maximum valuation on a sale, okay, at all times. And also, of course, while you're keeping them, if you keep them to that high standard, you're not going to have any voids and you're, of course, going to get the best rents that you can. Okay, so what was the benefit? Why go to 4? Quite simply, I want you to think about this. This property, so these properties can now be sold as 4 separate units. So think about that. What are your exit strategies? Your exit strategies are potentially it's 4 units now. You could be selling that to a buy-to-let investors. So you could put that out on the open market and your exit strategy could be to buy-to-let investors. If the area is right, it could be young couples wanting to buy their first home. You could be sending it to them, gives you another exit strategy. You might actually sell them to another investor, okay? But because you've created individual long leasehold titles, you've taken what was something that was quite not a liquid asset at all to make it a very liquid asset. And you're not just sat there waiting for a property investor who wants to buy a block of 4 apartments that have not been split or on a freehold. So you're not just waiting for that individual to come along to make you an offer. You're popping it straight on Rightmove and you potentially have far more potential buyers. They can now, of course, while you're keeping them, they can be rented out as 4 separate units. So depending on the area, it could be you know, as we've said, serviced accommodation, social housing, buy-to-lets, if they're big enough, they could be minimos. Okay, so you can hold them or you can sell them. So what you're doing is getting flexibility that you wouldn't have just with 3 terrace houses. Now I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to put it in the chat box if I can see in the chat box. If Rachel bought those property, and let's say she buys them in 2017, goes in, beautifully renovates them, absolutely fantastic, rents them out, but never splits the legal title. And the years go past, and let's take us to 2037. And Rachel's a bit older. She's done very nicely out of them, but as we get older, we all get a bit more tired, and she can't really be bothered to go back in and refurb them. I'm going to get you to type in the chat box, who's actually going to buy that 4 units from her if we do not separate them? So it's 1 freehold with 4 apartments done 20 years ago. So it's getting a bit tired. Who is she actually going to buy? Who's actually going to buy that from her? I'll get you to type in the chat box, please. A developer, yeah. So basically, you're going to sell it to a developer. And ironically, I imagine you sourcing agents who are on here tonight. Would I be right in saying that you're potentially, actually, that's where you're finding your properties to source on? Or those of you that are doing rent to rent, I'm wondering, is that some of the landlords, those landlords that are tired? They're some of the key people that we're looking. So if you're going to be selling to a developer, what's that developer going to want? Bear in mind that if Rachel had left it on 1 freehold, and over the years, maybe every 4 or 5 years, she had actually refinanced, they're going to want a discount, aren't they? Or below market value. So they are going to say, I want a discount. And you're going to say, no way, I don't want a discount. I'm not going to give you a discount. But your reality is, if you didn't set it up in the right way when you started in 2017, you're going to have to now go to a solicitor and split the title. You're going to have to possibly look at tax, capital gains tax implications. So this is how you're going to be feeling. Okay, so I just thought I'd put that in to cheer us all up on a Friday night. And those are actually the tired landlords that you are talking to now. And we do not want that to happen to any of you, not when you've worked so hard to build your portfolios. So let's just take this a bit further. So how can we? Now we know that we're going to be getting good rental income. If we, for example, had converted that, so she converted it into 4 apartments, let's say the rents were £500 per month for each apartment. So we've got 4 apartments. I'm tired, but even I can do that. It's £2,000 per month in cash flow. Great, fantastic. But it is quite a poor area that she's in, which is why they were quite cheap to buy. So let's just have a look at some of the works for capital growth, okay? I just want to do a comparison now as if we'd left it as houses. So let's say she'd left it as 2 houses, and then let's compare it as if what she actually did. So the purchase price you paid for house 1, she's done this as the 2 houses for you, okay, was 57,666. House 2 was 56,666. Now, she didn't actually do this, she did the flats, but we've put these figures in to compare. So let's say she'd renovated to the top standard to just create 2 really nice houses. You've got total cost there of £60,000. So total cost to buy them, renovate them, comes in at 175,332. Now, I've put there revaluation 2017, so that's when the refurbishment had been done, and I've put there bricks and mortar. So the valuation would be 2,000. Now, bricks and mortar is a layman's term. It's actually called comparable. So when you're talking to your valuer, we're talking about a comparable. Well, that's quite healthy because she's paid 175,332. We've then got a comparable valuation in 2017 of 200,000. But let's do a nice comparison by what actually she did. Instead, she went a bit outside the box. She went a bit different. She looked at title splitting and creating individual leaseholds. So we have exactly the same purchase price, 57,666, 57,666, but the renovation costs are higher. We've got 90,000 there because these are going to be very nice apartments. But look now what happens when we look at our valuations. I've got all your faces in my way, so I'm just going to move you up, guys. So in 2007, when she did it, and this is why she did it, when you go to originally do your valuations, okay, and you've done the work, we're going to look for a commercial-based valuation. Now, commercial-based valuation is based on rental income, okay? Now, because we've just done the project, we want to get the best valuation we can on the first mortgage. Okay, I'm not about future remortgages because they get over leveraged and it all goes wrong. We want to get the highest valuation we can. So a commercial valuation, when she did this deal 2017, based on the rental income, meant each apartment was worth 65,000. So the equivalent for each house was 130, which meant those properties, I say her, but I should say them really, ultimately was £260,000 as opposed to £200,000. Okay, so your added value, your uplift is £60,000. Now that is based on her renting them out as buy-to-lets, because based on the size and where they were, that's what appropriate. But what I want you to be thinking in your minds was the same logic would apply if they'd been shops. The same logic would apply if actually we're going to use these for serviced accommodation or social housing or HMOs, okay, or mini-mos. So just bear that in mind. But what becomes interesting, if a little bit much for Friday night really, is when we come into the future, okay, and these are, we've done this for 2021 as well, because these are real factual ones. We don't want to carry on relying on commercial valuations. It's dangerous to continue focusing on commercial valuations because, number one, if there only ends up being one or two lenders in the market, we're stuck. If something happens with our rents, we're not going to get the same valuation. So what we're looking for the future, to be future-proof, so we sleep at night, we really want to look at those bricks and mortar valuations, the comparable mortgages, the comparable valuations on our exit. That's what we want. So the comparable valuations today, she's done these, Rachel did these literally last week, for those converted the apartments. The first one is 165, the second one's 165. So the valuation of those 4 apartments now is 330, okay? And that's because they were split into flats. Now, I've got some more stats for you. The strange thing is, across England and Wales, is for some reason, and it still doesn't make sense to me, but it's a fact, houses end up being worth more than flats. Sorry, apologies, I went the wrong way around. Flats end up being worth more than terraced houses. And I'm sure in your own hometowns where you invest, you've noticed the little terraced houses never seem to go as much as for the flats. So I wanted to show you here again on this graph here. If again, we saw on that graph from Zoopla that we're looking at average house growth over time, or of about 6.73%, okay, per annum. I know that could come down, all right, but this is some figures for tonight for you to see. Well, if we'd left that, if Rachel had left that as 2 houses, she'd only be getting the growth on 2 houses. But because it has gone into 4 flats, she's getting the same 6.73% on 4 properties. Does that make sense? I'm going to see if we get some yeses in the chat box. So the capital growth, and if you think about that capitalized over all the years, you're gaining from subdividing it, but you have to do it legally through the leaseholds. So if we look here, if we take it for 22 years, which is her plan of ownership, okay, and we see where the houses would have gone, which is the orange. So we started at 2017 at 200,000. If we take that growth of 6.73%, it's coming in around 408,993, okay, in 22 years from now. But if you take the flats as they are, which was 260 today, let's take it 260 today, apply the same percentage increase, look at the difference, 531,612. So that is your difference between, the yellow is the difference between your flats and your houses. Now, when I went through this with Rachel, it hit me in the face a bit, because you don't always appreciate, do you, that sort of the compounding effect of this as it goes up. And it was a bit of an eye-opener. And also bear in mind that I first came across freehold leasehold as a solicitor, and I only ever saw it, I mean, many years ago, I only ever saw it as a legal process, but it isn't. We have to think about why was leasehold created, and it was created by the wealthy because they knew it created them more wealth. That's why we see it on Knightsbridge, etc. That's why it's there. So I'm going to get you to type something else into the chat room. And this is again to sort of emphasize to you the difference between relying on a commercial valuation, which is your rents coming in, as opposed to capital growth. So how often do you guys put your rents up on your buy-to-lets? Be completely honest, because when I actually thought about it, my answer was probably when the tenant leaves. I mean, are you putting your rents up by 6.73% per annum? I'll be patient and no, I don't. Thank you, Janet. Anybody else? I mean, how often are you, well, I won't pick on someone. How often are you guys actually putting your rents up? Or are you a bit like me? Tenant leaves and you think, oh, I wonder if it's gone up or not. Terrible, I shouldn't really say that, should I, as a property trainer? I should be saying, oh yes, I review them every 12 months, but I don't. So let's just pause for a second and think about this. When we have, I mean, the reason why you want a to buy a property that has several units in it is because it's easier, isn't it? Because fundamentally, what we want is a portfolio with a nice stable buy-to-lets, nice and boring, some HMOs maybe as well to give us the icing on the cake, maybe a bit of mixed use, a bit of commercial. But we want that basic buy-to-lets because they're less stressful. But to have and end up with 10, 12, 15, 16 buy-to-lets is buying 16 properties, which is a lot of work, a lot of stamp duty and a lot of money, hence we go for HMOs. But if you can buy one property and create 4 apartments, you've got one property to manage, you've got one property to insure, one property to repair, but it creates 4 to let units. So Patricia said, not per annum, but we've done it in some properties. Yeah, I think we tend to do it. So if you think about that, if our rental income is not increasing in line with our capital growth, okay, I'm going to turn around and say, let's just say on an average, we put our rents up by 2% a year. Okay, so I'm going to say that we've got a client tenant in 18 months, 2 years, they've gone out, rents have gone up. So let's say, if you don't mind me saying, happy for you to correct me, we probably assume a rent growth about 2% per year. So this is something I want to sort of go and explain to you slowly, because I know so many landlords have got to their 50s, 60s and 70s and realised that they've leveraged over and over again based on the commercial valuation, the rental income, and it has caught them out when they've gone to sell. So if the rents, let's go back to Rachel's property because it's a nice example. So 2017, her rents are basically $450 per month, brings her in nice income, 21,600 per year, which is flipping fantastic because bear in mind on this, it was just two houses, wasn't it? So that's brilliant. She went for a commercial valuation on the first refinance because she wanted to get as much money out. So based on the rental, that was done on an income multiplier done by the valuer at the time, which was around 12%. That got to the value of 260. Okay. So let's just jump forward to 2021, assumed a rent growth of 2%. Rents have gone up about 486. Rental's gone up fine, just still happy at 23. But if we now jump all the way to 2025 and 2029, now I know some of you younger ones are thinking, oh, it's miles away, but trust me, it comes sooner than you think. It really, really does. And it's wonderful, it brings grandchildren, but it also brings grey hair. Well, and I know it could be, and I know they could jump, and I know it could be more than 2%. But if in 2029, Rachel is looking at a rental income of 27,210, she's probably still quite happy with that. It might even that she's paid off chunks of the mortgage by then, absolutely happy. But if we had always been relying on a commercial valuation based on a multiplier of the rent, okay, which is what you would have to rely on if you had not split the title into leaseholds. So if she had not split the title into leaseholds, she'd just left it physically divided, but had not split the title, she'd left it till the end. The only valuation she could possibly get would be a commercial valuation. And on that basis, the commercial valuation would be 327,525. Okay, I'm hoping that you're with me. But this is the point. By doing it correctly, increasing the leaseholds, she can either rely on the commercial valuation, or she can go and get a comparable valuation of each of the units. Okay, now if she'd left it at 2 houses and we continued with the capital growth, which was the 6%, they'd have been valued about 408. But because she did the 4 flats into individual leaseholds, we then applied the 6%, the valuation comes up at 531. All because in 2007, I do apologise about my green screen, I don't know why it's doing that, but because she put the thought and the planning in 2017 to do it then, get it over with, take the benefit of the multiple dwelling relief, stamp duty relief, buying it in the correct company, because she made the effort in 2017, by the time she's an old lady, she wouldn't like me saying that, in 2029, okay, she has the benefit. Or it could be she wants to sell them in 2025, okay? And that is why you look at title splitting as soon as possible. But remember, all this, you only do it once at the beginning and then you forget about it. Then you get on with your strategy, whatever it was, SA, social housing. So that's just another way of seeing it if you're not very good at numbers. I like to visualize something. So we've got here the comparable growth, so a commercial valuation, which remember you would have to have if you didn't do the leasehold title split, versus the bricks and mortar or the comparable valuation, which you can get if you've done the properly freehold leasehold split or common hold. Okay, and they just nicely seen grey, given you on the time, it takes you to that. Okay, so I know that's a lot for a Friday night, but I'm hoping it would give you a few light bulb moments. And I'm going to put in the chat box, I mean, obviously I'll go into the breakout rooms for any questions. But if you would love to, okay, I'll just answer Alistair's question there. If you would like to find more, I'm just going to give you a little click. So Alistair, you also have the revenue from the service charge and ground rent on each unit. Technically you do, Alistair, but remember, if you that's only if you sell it. Okay, and really we create friendly leases, so I wouldn't really over fixate on that. So I'm going to be there for your questions in the breakout rooms. Hopefully a few light bulb moments. Please picture title split as that umbrella across the top. And I've also just popped into the chat box, because you're on here this evening, we do run a 2-hour masterclass, which I've given you a massive discount on if you want to come on and find out more. As it's a lot for the night, isn't it? So I will stop talking now.
Thank you very much.